You've been nice for too long. You let things slide, hoping people would understand your silence. You gave more than you got, thinking loyalty would be returned. But instead, you watched people take advantage, talk over you, disrespect you, and then act like it's normal. They treat your boundaries like suggestions, your kindness like weakness, and your presence like background noise. You weren't born powerless. You were never taught how power actually works. You weren't taught that in human behavior, the one who controls perception controls everything. And this is where dark psychology enters, not manipulation, not cruelty, but understanding the psychological codes that silently govern influence and emotional power. Today, I'm going to show you 4 powerful psychological tricks based on real human behavior that will shift how people treat you. These tricks are calm, silent, and deeply impactful. You won't need to change who you are. You'll just stop giving away power without realizing it. By the end of this video, you'll feel like you're no longer chasing respect. People will sense something different in you and begin adjusting themselves around you. These aren't tactics you scream, they're behaviors you embody and others feel. Let's start learning the invisible weapons of presence, silence, control, and emotional contrast, and finally master the power that's been sitting inside you unused.
Chapter 1. Trick 1. The cold pause. Power doesn't always need volume. In fact, the deepest power is often delivered in silence, in stillness, in the moment where everyone expects a reaction and you choose to give none. This is the first trick, the cold pause. It's simple, but it's unnerving. It's calm, but it disturbs people more than anger ever could. The cold pause is when you deliberately pause after someone tries to provoke you, not to suppress emotion, but to trigger discomfort in them. It's not passive, it's intentional. Imagine this. Someone says something sly to you in front of others. Maybe they make a sarcastic remark about your intelligence, or they laugh while dismissing your opinion. In that moment, your heart might race. Most people would either laugh along nervously, defend themselves, or fight back. All of those reactions give them control. But when you go completely still, just for a few seconds, something shifts. You don't respond. You don't smile. You just look at them, calmly, as if you've already understood more than they intended to reveal. That silence, it becomes a mirror, and they're forced to look into it. In psychology, this triggers what's called projective discomfort, the tendency to fill silence with one's own guilt or insecurity. Your lack of reaction makes them uncomfortable because they can no longer read or control your energy. Here's what happens inside their mind. Why aren't they reacting? Did I cross a line? Do they know something I don't? Are they angry or just stronger than me? This spiral of uncertainty is what makes the cold pause powerful. It forces others to reevaluate their behavior without you. It works in relationships, in offices, during arguments, and even in everyday conversations. Silence, when used correctly, becomes a weapon, a calm, cold one. But here's the key. It only works if your body language doesn't flinch. If you pause and show nervousness, it's weakness. But if you pause and stay still, stay composed, and let the silence carry weight, that's control. Let's take a real example. If someone at work publicly questions your idea, maybe they say, "That's not going to work, we've tried things like that before," you don't jump in to defend yourself. You pause, you look at them for a few seconds. You let the silence hold. Then, calmly, you redirect the energy. Noted. We'll see how it plays out. No anger, no argument, just silent dominance. People who use this technique report a strange result. Those who once interrupted them begin second-guessing themselves. The same colleagues who mock them start respecting the space they take up, and over time, the cold pause becomes a reputation. People start to realize you don't mess with the calm ones. They see more than they say. Remember, power is rarely loud. It's almost always calm, deliberate, and quiet. Don't be afraid to let others sit in the discomfort they created. You're not being rude. You're letting reality speak louder than your emotions. This trick isn't about being cold-hearted. It's about keeping your energy from being stolen by people who thrive on your reaction. Use the cold pause in key moments, and you'll notice something change. People will begin adjusting to you instead of the other way around. And once you've mastered silence, you've already taken control of half the room. Let's move to the next level of psychological presence, where we don't just respond differently, but we emotionally dislocate others to reclaim our mental space.
Chapter 2, Trick 2, Emotional Dislocation. There's a point in every argument, every heated conversation, every emotionally charged moment where the other person expects you to stay emotionally engaged. That's how most people stay in control, by keeping you emotionally invested. But when you suddenly remove your emotional energy from the moment, you break the pattern, you shake their control, you shift the balance of power. This is emotional dislocation, the ability to pull your energy away from the emotional battlefield and leave the other person standing alone, holding the weapons they can no longer use. It's not indifference, it's not avoidance, it's intentional withdrawal of emotional currency, and it confuses the hell out of people. Let's break it down. When someone is arguing with you, provoking you, or trying to get a rise out of you, they rely on your emotional response to validate the game. Whether it's a partner guilt-tripping you, a friend making passive-aggressive comments, or a coworker pushing you in a meeting, the goal is simple: keep you in a reactive state. But when you emotionally detach mid-interaction, when you become still, observant, and unbothered, they lose access to your emotional supply, and they start to panic, even if they don't show it. Here's what emotional dislocation looks like. They say something loaded like, "You never support me when I need you." Instead of defending yourself, just say, "I see," and then go quiet, or better, shift the subject, leave the room, or let time pass before responding. You create emotional space where they expected connection, and that space makes them feel unstable because they don't know what you're thinking, how much you care, or if they even reached you. In psychology, this creates emotional ambiguity, which leads to internal chaos for the one trying to control you. The brain craves emotional closure, and when you deny that closure, it triggers obsession, self-reflection, or emotional collapse in the other person. Let's take a real example. Imagine someone close to you starts blaming you for their own failures. "You never believed in me, that's why I couldn't do it." Now, you could defend yourself. You could cry, argue, or try to prove your love. That's what they're expecting, because it keeps them in the role of the victim and you in the role of the guilty one. But emotional dislocation says, pause, then walk away, or just say, "That's how you see it," and move on. No emotion, no apology, just quiet withdrawal. What happens next? They're left with their own words, echoing, unanswered, and without your reaction, they have no ground to stand on. Suddenly, they're talking to themselves. Here's what's powerful. Emotional dislocation doesn't mean you don't care. It means you won't trade your peace for validation. You won't explain yourself just to make someone else feel right. This trick is especially useful when dealing with emotional manipulators, narcissists, or chronic guilt trippers. These people feed on reactions. They don't seek truth, they seek power, and your silence makes their strategies useless. But here's the warning: you must do this with calm energy, not resentment. Emotional dislocation only works if your energy is grounded. If you look angry or passive-aggressive, it invites more conflict. But if you're calm, measured, and focused, it makes others shrink into their own chaos. People say, "That's cold," but here's the truth: peace feels cold to those who live in chaos. Use emotional dislocation not to punish, but to protect your inner space, because the moment you stop dancing to their emotional rhythm, they lose control of the music. Let's move to trick 3, a technique that flips power without saying a word: reverse expectation. Chapter 3, Trick 3, Reverse Expectation. Sometimes the most disarming thing you can do is the opposite of what they're waiting for. This is reverse expectation, a dark psychology trick that turns psychological pressure back onto the other person by doing what they least expect. You see, people operate based on patterns, especially manipulators. They study your behavior. They calculate when you'll snap, when you'll apologize, when you'll fold, so they set traps, not physical ones, but emotional setups. And they wait for your usual response. But when you break that response with calm unpredictability, their entire strategy collapses. Let's understand this more clearly. When someone tries to intimidate you, they're expecting fear or submission. When someone accuses you unfairly, they expect defense or guilt. When someone disrespects you subtly, they expect either silence or emotional outburst. Reverse expectation means giving them none of it, and instead flipping the entire moment upside down. If someone mocks you in a meeting, don't defend yourself or try to be clever. Say something unexpected like, "Interesting," I'll think about that and move on like it never touched you. They won't know what just happened because they were prepared for a reaction, not a redirection. Here's the psychology behind it. Expectation creates control, reversal creates disruption, and psychological disruption breaks manipulation faster than confrontation. Let's take a real example. If someone tries to guilt trip you by saying, "I guess I'm just the only one who cares about this relationship," most people would respond with reassurance or frustration. But with reverse expectation, you say calmly, "Maybe. If that's how it feels, take the space you need." Then you leave the emotional door open, not slammed, but quietly walked through. Now they're the one standing in the confusion. Because the moment they expected you to beg, you gave permission, and permission is power. Why does this work? Because emotional control is built on predictability. People who manipulate don't like danger. They like scripts. They create patterns where you play a role that benefits them. Maybe you're the fixer, the pleaser, the explainer, the one who never walks away. Reverse expectation burns that script without starting a war. It says, "You don't know me as well as you thought. I'm not reacting the way you trained me to. I'm free, and you didn't see it coming." This isn't passive aggression. It's clarity without drama. Let's go deeper. A person tests you by showing disinterest, waiting to see if you'll chase them. You don't. You pull back more. Suddenly, they're the one wondering. Another person makes a comment to lower your confidence, expecting you to defend yourself. You don't. You simply say, "Thanks for the input," and go back to your task like it meant nothing. Every time you flip the expected script, they lose a little more psychological control. But here's what matters. Your energy must stay calm, grounded, and unbothered. Reverse expectation only works if your response feels natural, not calculated. If it feels like a performance, they'll sense it. But if it comes from a place of genuine self-possession, it lands hard. This trick creates silence after chaos. It makes people rethink the way they approach you. And over time, they start adapting to you. Not because you're aggressive, but because you're unreadable. In a world where everyone is trying to trigger a reaction, the one who rewrites the script becomes the one who controls the room. Now that you've learned how to confuse through reversal, let's explore something even more subtle. How to validate someone so quietly it makes them question everything. Chapter 4. Trick 4. Silent validation. Power doesn't always come from speaking. Sometimes it comes from being the only one who doesn't say what they're begging to hear. This is silent validation, a dark psychology technique where your silence becomes louder than approval and far more addictive. Let's break it down. People crave validation. Even those who act strong, cold, or indifferent. Everyone, on some level, wants to feel seen, admired, respected. And most people use words to give or get that feeling. But here's the trick. When you don't say it, when you don't compliment them, don't give approval, don't give emotional reward, and instead just remain calm, aware, present, it creates a tension, a psychological hunger. That silence becomes more powerful than any praise because it forces them to wonder, what are they thinking about me? Do they even like me? Did I impress them or not? And once someone starts thinking like that, they unconsciously start chasing. You didn't flatter them, you didn't criticize them, you just left the space open, and they filled it with insecurity, curiosity, and desire. Here's how this works in a real-world setting. Imagine someone tries to impress you with a story about their success. Most people would respond with, "Wow, that's amazing," or "That's so cool." But with silent validation, you just give them a slow nod, maybe a half smile, and nothing else. You don't confirm their ego. You don't deny it either. You just let the moment breathe. What happens next? They talk more, they try harder, they get louder, funnier, more detailed, all in the hope of pulling some reaction from you. And the more they try, the more they reveal. You, on the other hand, stay centered, curious, observant, in control. Why does this work? Because most validation is cheap. People give it too easily, it loses power. But when you become the one whose approval isn't easily earned, whose emotional responses are selective and rare, people start to value every tiny signal from you like gold. It's not arrogance, it's awareness. Let's go deeper. If you walk into a room and give everyone your full energy, your smiles, your compliments, your approval, people enjoy it, but they don't respect it. It becomes expected. But if you walk in with presence, listen more than you speak, and only offer your approval sparingly, The entire room adjusts around your energy. Suddenly, people want your attention. They measure your reactions. They feel pulled toward you without knowing why. That's the effect of silent validation. You make people work for the emotional reward they're used to getting for free. And here's the twist. The reward never comes the way they expect. You give it through subtle gestures, not direct words. A glance, a pause, a calm acknowledgement, nothing more. But everything they needed. If someone flirts with you and you don't respond with flattery, but with quiet interest, it stings in the best way. If someone tries to provoke you and you show no anger, no defense, just steady calm, it burns through their ego. This trick isn't about being cold, it's about holding value. You train people, without saying a word, to see your validation as rare, and anything rare becomes powerful. That's how power moves without volume. So now you've learned how to starve them of emotional supply, not to hurt them, but to control the pace of the interaction. We've explored dependency, dislocation, reversal, and silence, each trick built upon the last, creating emotional power layer by layer. Now, it's time for the final message. Final message. Now stop for a second and think about what you've just learned. This wasn't about games. This wasn't about manipulating others just for the thrill of it. This was about something deeper. The kind of power that reshapes how people feel around you without you needing to force anything. You've seen how emotional dependence isn't random. It's crafted. You've seen how confusion, when used deliberately, can flip control in your favor. You've seen how expectation, when reversed, turns strength into weakness and silence into dominance. And most importantly, you've seen how just one unspoken signal can be louder than words. This is what dark psychology really is. Not darkness for destruction, but darkness for direction. Learning how emotions move people, learning how reactions give power, and how silence reclaims it. Maybe you've already felt it, some part of you, waking up, realizing that the way you've been treated, the way you've responded, the way you've let people in, all of it can be redefined. And if this video sparked that shift, even in the smallest way, then you're ready. So subscribe, not for views, not for numbers, but to train your perception. Because the next time someone tries to manipulate you, they won't even know they've lost until it's too late. You've started something powerful, and I promise what's coming next will make you untouchable.